What's going on, everybody? Welcome into our Luigi's Pizza post-game show. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. It is great to be talking to you even after that game that we just saw. Obviously, a pretty brutal performance overall by Green Bay. And yes, it's preseason. It's game one of preseason. A lot of guys were not playing in totality. The ones that did, did not play. The starters that did not play very long for the most part. You never, ever, regardless of circumstances, preseason, regular season, postseason, for a quarter, inter squad scrimmage, anything like that. You don't want to put that brand of football on the field where you can't do anything. You can't really run the football up until Lamar Johnson in the fourth quarter had the one big run. You can't really, tackle. You can't really, catch passes. You can't run a play without committing a penalty. And you can't really stop anyone. It was just a pretty abysmal performance no matter what. No victory pizza from Luigi's today, unfortunately, but this is the day that you want your Luigi's Pizza to be able to get you through and cope with it. I know that's probably what I'm going to be doing here in just a little bit. It's going to be a late night for me tonight. As soon as we're done here, I'll probably stay on for 30, 45 minutes or so, try to get to as many questions as I can. But I will still rewatch the game on the condensed version tonight. So that'll be as soon as I'm done here. And then after that, I'll go and record tomorrow's podcast, hopefully with a few positive takeaways from today's game. I did think at first glance, Barron Sorrell had a solid night. It looked like Jordan Morgan, for the most part, held up okay. Nazir Stackhouse made a couple plays. So I do think there are going to be a couple positives, hopefully. But again, an abysmal performance overall, and just one that's tough to watch. Doesn't mean anything that will actually matter come regular season. They had a very similar game against Denver a season ago in week 2 of preseason. In fact, they only scored 2 points in that game and got completely boat raced in Denver. And it had no effect on the season whatsoever, just like this one will have no effect on this season whatsoever. But again, you still want to see a better overall performance than that, especially at home, especially when, it is sort of your first game of 2025 and you want to make a good impression and everything like that. I do think sometimes that the wake-up call is worth it, and especially in this scenario, I could make a very strong argument. You can say, let's just cope it. Whatever. It's not. I could make a strong argument that if you were going to get a wake-up call like that, like this is literally the best game to have it. There's literally no better chance or better time to have a wake-up call than your first preseason game. You've got a lot of time between now and Detroit or against Detroit in week 1. And of course, you've got all season still. Again, this will not define the team in any way, shape, or form. The other thing, and this will again be called just a cope, except for the fact that I said it this morning on the pregame show, and I think I talked about it on Pack a Day Radio earlier this week as well, is that when you do have a new coach coming in, there is a little bit more of an intensity in those first games. You want to set the tone, you want to get a win, you want to reset the culture, you want to get buy-in from your players. And those wins for somebody like Aaron Glenn in this type of game, it actually kind of means something because you want to show proof of concept that what you're doing is actually heading in the right direction and that you're getting this team turned around. That actually kind of matters a little bit for Aaron Glenn. It doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot for Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur will be judged on the postseason. And right now, again, you want some easy wins if you're Aaron Glenn as head coach. So again, not apologizing for or trying to just sweep it under the rug either. I think we've discussed at first that this was a pretty disgusting performance overall. But I still think there's going to be some hopefully positive takeaways as we get to the All-22. And I think, again, this will be a good wake-up call for the team and what they need to do to kind of correct some of that stuff. It is an interesting dynamic when you're going against the same players every day at practice. Sometimes you can get a little bit complacent. You can get some tells on things that you're getting used to. Again, there's no tackling or things like that. So all of a sudden you get into a game like that and it can be like, oh yeah, everything's flying a little bit faster. And it certainly seemed like the Jets were a little bit more ready for that than what the Packers were. And they're going to have to correct that moving forward. And they will. Again, it's not going to define who this team is in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, great to see Matthew Golden not only get a catch, but draw pass interference from one of the best corners in all of football in Sauce Gardner. Again, you kind of saw the hands-on display on the one catch. Amar Johnson, the very nice run at the end. Daniel Whalen had a fantastic night. And I know, you're going to point to like, oh, this team still can't catch the ball. All right. The Romeo one, I think should have been caught. I think it probably for me would be a drop, but the defensive back did get his hands in there, knocked that one away. And then you have, again, these players might end up, seeing the field at some point, but it's Malik Heath, it's McCole Hardman, it's guys that probably are not going to be, huge impactful players on your team. And so, again, once you hopefully get Jaden Reed back and Dontavian Wicks and some of these guys, that hopefully is playing far less of a factor than what we're seeing. Not again that last year was great when it came to the drop passes, so I get the correlation, but for the most part, these are not players that are going to be playing a ton for you this upcoming year. A lot of the penalties were on backup offensive linemen. Like again, these are things that when we are talking about Packers Lions or when we're talking about wild card or divisional round in the postseason, you're not going to be talking about, well, yep, remember we saw that penalty from Anthony Belton and we should have known at that time. It's just not going to be a factor. So get it cleaned up, go back, watch the tape, burn the tape, bury the tape, do whatever you need to do to kind of get past this one. I think it's probably a good wake-up call. I think it's a great week for an inter-squad scrimmage and then an opportunity to play Indianapolis this upcoming week and just kind of go from there. So I don't have a ton more to go over from just what we saw in the game standpoint. Other than, I'm sure I'll get to a lot of your questions here of certain individual stuff within the game. This is definitely one of those where I'll watch the condensed version and get some takeaways from that. But until I get the hands on the all 22, it's just going to probably take a little bit of time to kind of figure out everything that is actually good, bad, and ugly from this one. There's probably, unfortunately, a little bit more bad and ugly, but we'll get to that in due time. We'll break it down, early this week with the actual, kind of all 22 takeaways as time goes on here. But I should also mention, I really appreciate you guys being here. It was a weird day for me. I was all getting set to prepare for all of this and had the power go out earlier today. And then after that had the live Q&A, which I appreciate people showing up for over at Hagemeister Park, and then had the game, and then was basically just buying time until I learned that the power came back on. Finally, the power came back on literally like 40 minutes ago, and then started driving home and got here again just about in time for the start of the 11:30 show here. So I really appreciate you guys being here, kind of bearing with me while I kind of got everything back in order here. Had to get everything restarted and whatnot. So thank you guys for being here, and really appreciate it, especially in a late night Packers preseason chat after a pretty brutal performance. You guys are junkies, and I cannot thank you enough for that. Let's get to a couple super chats really quick. If you do want to make sure your question gets answered, make sure to get those super chats in, because again, not sure exactly how long I'm going to stay here before I get to rewatching the game and getting ready for tomorrow's podcast as well. But Dylan says, at least I don't automatically get a sinking feeling in my gut anymore when our defense has to take the field. That's a good sign. Obviously, those first couple drives are not exactly what you wanted from the defense. And I pointed out, like, it's vanilla stuff, and people said, well, they're doing stuff that's not vanilla. There's truth to that, yes, but you're not game planning, you're not scheming up the New York Jets, you're not putting together a cohesive plan and practicing these certain situations in and out. It's a totally different ball game than what you're going to get in the regular season. And listen, there'll be plenty of time to bash this team if this is how they want to perform in the regular season. I just don't have a lot of concern on that at the moment. The key takeaways for me in this one is Jaden Reed's in a walking boot, not from this game, but from early in practice this week. That's a legitimate concern for me. Zane Anderson had a knee injury, core special teamer, backup safety. He's been running ahead of Kitano Ladapo as kind of that number, really the number 4 safety, but 3 if Bullard's in the slot. And that is concerning to me. Corey Ballantyne went out with an injury. Those are the things that actually will affect this team potentially come, week 1, if those injuries are anything serious. So injuries, to me, we talked about it ahead of time. That's really the only thing that matters in this game. They had a couple of them that are noteworthy, at least in Ballantyne and Zane. And we found out that Jaden Reed's in a walking boot, which is not what you want to see either. Matt LaFleur did state after the game that there's hope that Reed could be back for the start of the season, but did state anytime that somebody's in a walking boot, it does certainly give you levels of concern. And so, his week 1 is going to definitely be something to keep an eye on moving forward. And you're starting to get to these now. It's like Xavier McKinney, Nate Hobbs, Jaden Reed. There's a chance that they could be ready week 1, but they're probably going to be a little bit under the gun when it comes to actually being prepared and ready at that point in time. And you certainly don't want to go in week 1 against Detroit missing those 3. And then, by the way, if they are, the next game is just 4 days after that. And if you're not sure about any of those, you are like, you could be missing them for those first 2 games of the season against 2 of the tougher opponents. So those are not things you want to see right now with Nate Hobbs, Jaden Reed, Xavier McKinney, and some of these injuries starting to pile up. Again, I mentioned the other day, I'm not concerned yet because we don't have any indication that any of these will be week 1 injuries, but we're now starting to get some indications that it's going to lead up pretty close to that point for guys like Hobbs, Reed, and McKinney. And again, that's not what you want to see. On one piece of good news is, Elton did not practice on, what was it, Thursday? And we had some concern. It was the back again. You're like, all right, what's going on there? And then Keyshawn Nixon did not practice with the team. He did individual drills, but not team drills. But Keyshawn played in the game, as did Elton Jenkins, and started. So those are good signs for both of those two players. And hopefully, their specific injury issues, whatever it would be for Nixon, and then with Elton, are kind of behind them. All right, R.R. Smith, thank you for the super chat. Here's the thing. The field looked good tonight. The groundskeeper crew said we're not using the preseason doesn't matter excuse. We're still professionals. Yes, the field was in fantastic shape, especially considering there was a lot of rain and storms and everything throughout the course of the day. Clearly, they had the tarp on it, which helped. But no, they did a great job with it, and it didn't seem to be extra slippery or anything like that. So kudos to the grounds crew for sure. I think it was that Alan Johnson and his team. Is it time yet to call for the Sean Clifford laser show? Just when I thought things could not get any worse, tough E-Sox. Just when I thought that, the lack of power at my house and the Packers getting absolutely blown out in a really ugly game, just when I thought that was going to be kind of the crux of the issues that we were going to have to deal with tonight, my guy, Tim Boyle, the actual laser show, goes in against Tampa in preseason and proceeds to go 4 of 13 for 24 yards, a 1.8 yard average, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 sack, and a quarterback rating, and I kid you not, of 0.6. Of 0.6. That is, you and I and everyone else in chat only missed Tim Boyle's quarterback rating by 0.6. We had a 0.6 worse passer rating than Tim Boyle did tonight. So my guy, I feel for him, but that was a tough laser show performance from him. And I'm not ready for a Sean Clifford laser show. None of the quarterbacks really got anything going. Amar Johnson was, again, probably about the only highlight on offense. Again, we'll look back at Jordan Morgan. I thought Jordan Morgan might have had a positive performance as well, but it's going to take a bit to go through the all 22 and confirm that one way or the other. All right. Let's get to some chats here. I'm going to try to get to the member chats. And again, if you want to make sure you get it in, get those super chats in. Let's see. At least Wooden played well. It did look like Colby Wooden had a solid performance as well. These are the ones that I'm really looking forward to going and look at. Obviously, Jacob Monk, a brutal night for Jacob Monk. If you're wondering why Monk was inactive for a good chunk of last season, we may have learned today. And again, one game is not going to define any player, but man, that was about as bad as it gets, allowing a sack, 3 different holding penalties. It was a rough performance for Jacob Monk in there, but looking forward to look at the trenches in this game. Anthony Belton, I know he had a couple penalties, but he had a big pancake. I think a couple of them as well. Had some pretty impressive blocks in there. Really want to see Stackhouse, Wooden in the trenches. Enigbare looked like he had a good night. Baron Sorrell looked like he had a good night. Again, these are just at first glance, so it's really, really difficult to tell, but the trenches are certainly what I'm going to be keeping an eye on more than just about anything. Definitely some wide-eyed rookies out there tonight. Reminded me a lot of the Broncos game last preseason. It was a very similar game to that. Crazy to me that Clifford's in his 3rd year and he still reads off a wrist sleeve, even with LaFleur's vanilla game plan play calling. That's not super indicative of anything, Chicken. What that can sometimes what that means is you have the play on your wristband because it's a really long play call, and LaFleur, instead of having to read off the play call in its entirety, which takes a bunch of time, and then Clifford has to reread that to the rest of the team. And then by the time you get out of the huddle, there's 8 seconds on the play clock. Well, LaFleur, or in this case, Steno, who's calling the plays, might say play number 8, and rather than a 15-word play call, and then Clifford can just look at play number 8 and then read it and then give the really long play call in the huddle. But therefore, you only get it once instead of having to do it twice, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily indicative of anything. Last comment, I really don't like to hate on the Packers players, but Monk just doesn't look like an O-lineman. He stands in the huddle and there's wide receivers with bigger arms than him. Got a lot of growing to do. I guess I couldn't say that for sure. I haven't looked at his musculature to any great extent, but he definitely had a very, very tough game tonight. Yes. Richard, at first glance, looks like Colby Wooden had a good game. Also, congratulations to him graduating today as well. That was a really one of the very cool, a few cool moments during the course of the day when they announced that he had graduated from Auburn, which is pretty cool. Drink several shots, burn the tape, and never talk about this moment again. Yikes, so much anticipation, but it's only one game. Does our defense look great in training camp due to sub O-line play? I'm glad you brought this up because I think here's what needs to be said about this. The players that have looked good in camp, it's not necessarily anything that we're, making up when we're talking about it. I think Isaiah Simmons is such a great example of this and why I've been on the let's temper expectations bandwagon with everyone, and especially with Isaiah Simmons. For those of you who watched or listened to my episode the other day of like the best and worst players of training camp so far, if you remember, I said, I'm not ready to crown any of the best ones or drown any of the bottom ones, save for one. The only one I was ready to say he legitimately looks amazing and I don't think it's a fluke was Brandon McManus. That was the only one who, by the way, today was 2 of 2 on his kicks, including like a 47-yarder. That was the only one I felt good about. Everyone else on the plus side, there are it's camp. So as excited as we can be about some of the players that, were performing well in camp, like an Isaiah Simmons, I didn't want to get too high about those or too low against the ones that were not maybe having as strong of a camp. The same thing goes for today. The ones that might perform well in this preseason game, it's not necessarily indicative of a whole hell of a lot. And the same thing on the ones that perform poorly. There's going to be a middle ground sometimes. But Isaiah Simmons is a great example of this, of somebody that I've been saying over and over, I really enjoy how he's played in camp so far. There have been multiple plays. He looks fast as hell. He looks like the game was slowing down for him a little bit. But what have I said throughout the entirety of this? When he's been on the field defensively in NFL games for Arizona and New York, it's not great. It usually doesn't go very well. This is usually a player that you do not want on the field defensively. On special teams, it's a different story. He's been really good on special teams. I'll, maybe have a chance to go back and watch some of his special team stuff from today. But it has not gone great for him under the lights when when he's actually out there on defense in games. Today we saw some of that. It didn't seem like he had a very good performance today. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't have a good camp up until this point. It really seems like he has. And there was a lot of positive comments from Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, amongst others. Maybe it's just a burn the tape game for Isaiah Simmons, but this has sort of been the MO, the super talented player that just hasn't been able to put it together in games itself. That's what we saw today. Doesn't also mean that he can't go out and maybe see some of the stuff that he's been doing in camp, what went different today, and then hopefully correct it, and maybe he can still have a big impact. Mecole Hardman has made numerous big plays all throughout camp and preseason. He looked like by far and away, and I mean by far in a way, the most natural hands catcher on the entire team when it came to returning punts. He looked so natural catching punts every single day in practice. And then today he catches one inside the 5, which was not a good idea. And then he muffs the next one. It looks nothing like it's looked in camp. He's come up with multiple clutch receptions. He gets out there and has one clang right off of his hands. So just like we cannot take some of the really good stuff that's taking place in camp and count that as, hey, that's who they're going to be. Don't take some of the bad stuff that happened in one preseason game either and say that's who they're going to be. There's probably somewhere in the middle, but that's why we play all of this out, evaluate everything, keep an eye on the stuff that's happening in camp, keep an eye on the stuff that's happening in preseason, and then hopefully Goody and company get it right when they actually go to making this 53-man roster cut down and putting the team together and putting this team hopefully in the best positions to succeed. I'm going to come back to Mike McGee in just a second. I want to get to some of these super chats really quick. All right, Nick Fargo. Hate that I have to say that a preseason game was a burn the tape kind of game, but here we are. Very similar to Denver a year ago. It definitely is. I'm not looking forward really to going back and rewatching this on the condensed version. I am looking forward to watching it on the all 22 because I want to see, I think the cool part about all 22 in preseason is the score doesn't matter. The outcome doesn't matter. What does matter is who played well and who didn't. That's kind of the only thing that matters. And in this case, I'm hoping that there are a few extra wins in there for some of the players that could be positives. And hopefully not as many losses as I think there's probably going to be. But I am interested to see what the tape looks like on the All-22. The condensed version is not one I want to rewatch. By the second half of this game, I'm like, oh my God, just please implement a running clock or something and just get this thing over with. But definitely a burn the tape type of game for Green Bay in this one. Taylor Yeager. It was awesome seeing Melton coming downhill and charging the ball carry. As always, your commitment is second to none. Go Pack Go. Really appreciate that. He did have a missed tackle as well, but he made, I want to say 3, right around there, really strong tackles, and definitely was not afraid to put his shoulder down, wrap up, and go make plays as a tackler either. And we've seen that on special teams for him, which is why Green Bay was willing to make this change. But yeah, it was not too big for him, and not something that he was, just chicken winging in there or anything like that. He was ready to put, his head down and go make some plays as a tackler for sure. Carla with 20 Pack-A-Day memberships. Carla, thank you so much for that. You are awesome. And then Taylor gifted 5 Pack-A-Day memberships. You guys are amazing. Thank you so incredibly much for doing that. Appreciate you all being here. All right, what did I say? We're going to go to Mike McGee, I think, at 10:35. There we go. Jordan Love was a positive. Can't blame him if 3 balls are dropped. He had 1 overthrow, and Golden didn't catch a sweet slant. Also got a PI on Sauce. I think Golden caught everything his way. Did catch a sweet slant. Also got a PI on Sauce. We have 1 wide receiver with hands and Kraft. Yeah, we'll see. Again, I think some of the drop stuff that happened today, again, not going to be players that are playing a ton would be my guess. I do think Dobbs got the ball knocked out a little bit, although I would put that as a drop on Romeo. And I don't know if I would also say Jordan was a positive in this game. He did take a sack. He did have what I would kind of consider a little bit of a hospital ball to Luke Musgrave. That was not a great ball to him. And then, even the one to Dobbs was definitely a contested one with Sauce. It wasn't as bad as the stat line will look. I will definitely agree with that. But I don't know that I would put that as like a winning or positive performance for Jordan in this particular game. Just grateful policy didn't give out extensions. We'll know how the season will play out after September 11th. Hopefully the drops don't carry over, and the passing on 3rd and 1 doesn't either. Yeah, I don't think that ultimately the extension thing means a whole heck of a lot. He's not going to let either Goody or Matt go into next year as a lame duck coach. So he would have to decide to fire either of them basically this year to not give them an extension of some sort. And the only way that happens is if they have really abysmal years. If they have really abysmal years, this went in a very, very bad direction, almost out of nowhere. So yeah, I guess sure, but if things get that bad where either of those guys get fired, this would have been a massively, massively disappointing 2025 campaign. Can't wait to watch the All-22 and see how Morgan and Bullard fared on each play. Those are 2 good ones to look at, and Jordan Morgan is definitely one that I'm going to have an extra eye on for sure. Matt LaFleur really watched that performance and said starters are good and don't need to play for the rest of the postseason. I like him as a coach, but man, what standard does that set? It's the standard that it sets is that you have a plan and you go and execute it regardless of, any factors that, kind of go into it from this particular game. The truth is this game does not affect anything. And your plan going in was that you wanted to be able to not have to play your starters in games 2 and 3 because you're going to have the the scrimmages between the 2 teams in practice, right? The joint practices. So your theory going in, the reason you have it this way is because you don't want players, your core players playing in games 2 and 3 as you get closer to the season to get them to make sure that they are healthy against Detroit. What happened today is not ultimately going to change how you kind of want to go about keeping those guys healthy. And I think overall you kind of stick to the plan. And as he said, there's always things that can change. If they go out and completely crap the bed against, Indianapolis on practice on Thursday, maybe he will change his mind. If they Thursday and Saturday both look terrible, maybe the week 3, they'll change their mind. But I don't think that from a starting standpoint, you need to change up too much about what you're ultimately doing. I think they'll clean it up. They need to practice better. They need to prepare better in some of the, not that they prepared specifically for the Jets in this game, but just prepare to be ready for that type of, physicality, contact, etc. They'll do those things. And I don't think you need to completely reinvent everything because things didn't go exactly the way that you wanted them to today. I don't think it changes the standard. I think Matt has been very clear that this was a unacceptable performance overall. and that they will have to get things cleaned up. And my guess is that they very much will. We'll see a very different performance on practice on Thursday against Indy. And then I think even the number 2s and 3s and 4s and whatnot will perform much better against Indianapolis this upcoming Saturday. But we'll see. We'll see if things change. And again, he always said it's as he said, I should say in the post-game presser today, things are always subject to change, but I still want in general those guys healthy. The plan was to play those guys in preseason today. They did. Now let's see them in joint practices and hopefully get everyone there healthy against Detroit in week 1. He's got a foot injury. The question is what's with Jaden Reed in a boot? Just a foot injury. The hope is that he's going to be ready for week 1, but it's not anything that they're guaranteeing. And Jaden Reed didn't really, he said he didn't want to be wrong on anything. So he didn't give a timeline in the in the locker room post game as well. But hopefully he can get back for week 1, because as we know, he's going to be a very important piece of this team. All right. Patrick Jones, thank you for the super chat. So many penalties and drop passes. Yeah, just an ugly performance. I mean, the referees, by the way, like, this is a preseason game, guys. Like, you're going to have to let some of that stuff go just so that it can be almost like a watchable product. For those of you who don't know, offensive line play, when it gets to second and third stringers, fourth stringers, is so far behind defensive line play. I mean, there are way better defensive linemen when you get to that level, backup, second, third stringers, than there are offensive linemen in the league. So teams are just at a huge advantage defensively when you get into those situations, and offensively it makes it very, very tough. So yeah, there's probably going to be some holding penalties and things like that. Again, drops by Hardman and Heath, and the Dobbs one, again, whether you want to call it a drop or not, that's the one I really would have liked to have seen him come up with. But either way, they'll hopefully get it cleaned up and perform much better moving forward. All right, Dylan, thank you again. Not NFL related, but I find myself inexplicably interested in the WWE for the first time in my life as a fan of Cody Rhodes. What is your elevator pitch to dig deeper into wrestling? I don't know that I have one, Dylan. I just think it's something that the only thing I would say is an elevator pitch is just give it a chance without, judging it too harshly. And if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. That it's not certainly going to be everybody's. But I think if you give it a chance, it's not to sound like Mike McCarthy here, but it's like anything, whether it's a reality TV show, a sports team, wrestling, or whatever. It sucks until you get into the characters or you get into the players and you get into the minutia of everything. And then once you get into that and you buy into it and now you're interested to see what happens next, you're hooked. It's no different than, again, watching a reality TV show or any other TV show that once you get into the plot, the characters, whatever, it is really interesting. And if you're not, then it's not going to be your cup of tea. I go back. I hated baseball. I absolutely hated baseball. I couldn't stand, like, if even Sports Center had baseball highlights on, I was like flipping the channel. That's how much I couldn't stand. Didn't want to play it. Didn't want to watch it. Didn't want to see a baseball card of it. Could not stand baseball. And then I got into college, and this was right around the time where it was Weeks, Hart, Braun, Fielder, Hardy, all those guys, this unbelievably young Brewers team. And my friends in college were big Brewers fans. A lot of them were from Milwaukee. And so I would end up watching with them. And all of a sudden I got into Fielder and Braun and Weeks and Hart and hearing all their stories and how they came up in the minors and all these sort of things. And I bought into the characters, if you want to call them that. And then they started playing great baseball. I was hooked. I've been hooked ever since. I absolutely, and of course, now is a great time to be a Brewers fan. And it's the same thing with wrestling. I couldn't stand it. And I had a friend who kind of introduced me to it in like 6th grade. Him and I watched it together, got to know some of the characters, got interested in the storylines, and the rest was history. So it's not going to be for everyone. I totally get it. I'm not trying to evangelize anyone into wrestling, but there's a lot of different flavors and brands of it out there. And if you want to go watch, I'm a huge AEW guy. I'm not a huge WWE guy, but there's something that's a little bit different for everyone. That's for sure. All right, Scotty B45. Hey, Andy, I know both Matt and Jeff mentioned defense attacking, ripping at the ball this year. I didn't see it, but I did see it from the Jets players. What gives? Seem like there is a disconnect. This is another one of those things where if anyone's been at practice, they will have seen this every single play in practice. Guys are ripping, clawing, punching, doing everything they can to get the ball out. I didn't see it a ton in today's game. I think a couple things can happen in this instance and situation. I think, first of all, you get under the lights and the pressure becomes a little bit greater. Remember, a lot of the guys that are in there are fighting for roster spots, right? So you're trying to do everything right. Sometimes you're trying to maybe do everything a little bit too perfect. You're focusing on your play. You're focusing on the play call, what you're supposed to do for this particular play, and then you go out and execute. And then by the time you like kind of get settled in and everything, you're like, oh yeah, I didn't even punch at the ball or whatever. So I think some of that just needs to get ingrained second nature. But again, if you've watched it at camp at all, they've been doing it nonstop and constantly. Now, maybe it shows up on tape. Just because they didn't get a forced fumble or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't trying. Something I'll have to look back on tape a little bit more and see if it was there or not. But to your point, Scotty, and I really appreciate the $20 super chat, by the way. To your point, I didn't see a ton of it either. It did stick out to me as we were probably in like the third quarter of like, man, they didn't really, get any hand on a ball that looked like it could have even potentially been popped out. And I did kind of notice that as well. But yeah, I'm not sure I can explain the disconnect from why we've seen it so often at camp and just didn't really seem to see it tonight. But again, more to kind of course correct moving forward for this entire Green Bay team, but in this case, specifically the defense. Taylor, thank you for the super chat again. I know we are all in the dark on the Anderson injury. A knee injury is never something you want. Do you have any insight on the injury? I do not. It was a pretty ugly collision. I know he tried to walk it off and he couldn't. I don't think he got carted off or anything like that. So that's hopefully a good sign. But yeah, you never want to hear knee and just hopefully it's not anything long-term for him. He's a good player, core special teamer, definitely somebody that was trending to not only make the team, but might even get a couple packages here or there on defense, depending on the situation and circumstance, and would be playing a lot of special teams this year. So yeah, definitely some level of concern with it being a knee, but hopefully it's not as bad as maybe it looked or when you hear that knee diagnosis. All right. Going back here. Andy just finished up. Oh, his Luiges Pizza and is washing the dishes. Give him about 10, 15 minutes. That's amazing. Andy just slammed 6 shots of Jägermeister to get hyped for the stream and forget about tonight's preseason debacle. He'll be on in about 5 minutes. Andy is currently removing his Batman outfit in the Batcave and will be putting on his cap and coming up shortly. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Did anyone play well? Yeah, a couple we've talked about them, but even those I want to kind of watch in greater detail before I'm ready to crown anyone. I will say Daniel Whalen, I thought, had a heck of a game. It's just exactly what you want. Your punter to go out and dominate. Jennifer was in the same situation as me. So glad I had no power in the second half. Yeah, it was just one of those days in Wisconsin, I guess. It was not ideal. I thought Love actually looked really sharp for the most part. Him, Golden, and Morgan all look good. It has me feeling optimistic, even though the whole game was a disaster. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad performance from Jordan. It's certainly nowhere near what the box score would have said, but I think there's a couple plays you would certainly like to have back. When you take a sack, kind of throw into coverage with Sauce and, kind of leave one up there for Musgrave. That ended up kind of being a little bit of a hospital ball potentially. I think there's just the things that I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in a couple of those plays, but again, nowhere near as bad as the box score would indicate. At least we didn't leave anything on the field for other teams to build their strategies from. It's a great way of looking at it, Sergeant Dan. Defense was vanilla at best, and the starters seemed to back off when our guy got hurt. I don't know if I agree with the second part. And again, was it entirely vanilla? But there's a lot of like players playing off in coverage, allowing some of the check down stuff. And again, just not stuff that we have seen from Jeff Hafley in some of those key situations previously. The first one to Rome was a blatant drop, and the second one might have been more of a PBU, but it still looked like he could have caught it. Yeah, I'd have to go back and again watch those. But again, the one that was considered a drop definitely to me felt like a drop. Belton missed his assignment on that A-gap run, or lost his assignment on that A-gap run. I heard he pancaked somebody on it, but again, I have to go back and watch that as well. Melton had a couple nice tackles for sure. Melton on the sideline and a cap in the fourth quarter has me thinking he's a lock to make the team, to be honest. It could very well be. Could very well be. Do you think even with the joint practices this week that Matt could still give the starters a drive or two next week after their performance? He basically said after the game that no, it's not going to be the case. Let's see. I'm convinced Tim Boyle has blackmail material in like half the NFL front offices. I don't know how he keeps getting a job. The funny thing is, like, he's a veteran and you get him in and you work him out and it's like everything that you're looking for. He kind of knows everything. He's got the arm strength. And again, he's been in NFL locker rooms, and you get him in, you're like, man, this guy looks great. And then just when the lights come on, going all the way back to college, it's unfortunately just hasn't really been able to put it together. Looking forward to the Mortal Kombat death match between the doesn't matter apologists and the cut players fire the coach overreactors. And per usual, R.R. Smith, as I will always say, truth is somewhere in the middle. There should be some reaction to this game. If this game in general was not vomit inducing to you in some way, even if it doesn't mean anything super, important long term, it still just doesn't. It's not a great feeling to see the team go out and play like that. And I don't care what the situation is. I really don't. And Matt, you can clearly tell Matt felt the same way. It's an unacceptable brand of football to put on tape, no matter what. Period. End of story. And again, if you went in and like, Jordan didn't play, Malik didn't play, and like El Gurzma had to play like 3/4 of the game, or Clifford had to play 3/4 of the game or something, and like your offense just didn't click throughout, you can certainly forgive a loss by a large amount because of something like that or whatever. But when so many things in so many phases go wrong, penalties, turnovers, lack of execution, lack of tackling, drops, and you're just checking the box for everything that could possibly be ugly, you just that can't happen again, regardless of the situation or circumstance. So that ugly, and it's fair to criticize how the team played today. It's also fair to know that this is not going to have any bearing on what happens against Detroit. It's not going to have any bearing against what happens throughout the regular season, going into the playoffs, etc. It is a very, very, very meaningless charade that will not affect the team in any way moving forward, other than hopefully to wake them the hell up and say, all right, we've got to play a different brand of football than that going forward. Matt LaFleur seemed to say starters wouldn't be playing the rest of the preseason. I like him, but this really feels like it sets a bad standard. Go out there and earn your rest. Yeah, again, I understand the process that they're going through. As I've said a million times before, I don't think there's a right answer in these situations. If you believe they should play, that's fine. If you believe they should sit because you don't want injuries, I think that's fine too. I just think that you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. I do know he cited the numbers the other day of like, hey, if you want to avoid injuries, it's actually better to play guys in preseason, which is something I've talked about and sort of hypothesized in the past as well. I don't know if they hit those numbers today or not, but that's his prerogative, and he's going to have the pulse of the team, and he's going to have to live with that on what happens in Detroit. If they go out and crush Detroit or beat Detroit, nobody's going to go back and be like, oh, I can't believe they didn't play their guys in week 2. And if they get crushed by Detroit or just lose again, it's going to be up, same old. And, they should have played their starters more in week 2 and week 3. Just one of those things. And it goes the other way too. If he plays his guys and a key player tears his ACL in the second or third game, everyone's just say, why was he out there? Why was that player even out there in a meaningless preseason game? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You just got to get it right. If you do put players out there, you better hope like hell they don't get hurt. If you don't put players out there, you better hope like hell you perform in week 1. Hopefully this team goes out and performs well in week 1. All right. On the plus side, it was nice to see both Hardman and Heath rise to the occasion and fight for what could be the last wide receiver spot. Those bright lights, baby. Are we, this has got to be sarcasm, right? Because they both had very brutal days. Will have liked to see Matt LaFleur practice some clock management end of game. Yeah. Did not get that opportunity today for sure. Apparently we got a Bears fan in chat. So Sean Ryan, the guaranteed right guard now. I sort of expected him to be battling Morgan, but looks like Morgan's battling Walker instead. It definitely feels that way so far, Jeffrey. I do think that Ryan is probably going to win the right guard spot. And it doesn't seem like there's any real battle at the moment. Also, we don't know when Rashid's going to be back. And so right now Morgan is taking that spot. And I think if she does get back and they want to play Morgan, I think it will be in a timeshare with Walker at left tackle. But I think it would trend right now, if everyone was healthy, that Morgan's probably your number 6 guy and the first guy up off the bench. All right, just trying to get to as many member chats as I can get here too. Dobbs had 2 to 3 drops and the one in his hands, and Sauce broke it up. I don't think it was 2 to 3. I don't think he got targeted twice. That definitely felt like he could have come up with the one for sure. John, thank you for the kind words there. Appreciate that. J. Cole's elevator speech is to go watch Stone Cold Steve Austin in the Attitude Era. That's about as good as it gets. What's disappointing is I know our receivers know how to catch when they're playing Madden. Fair enough. Would you trade the Packers not making the playoffs for 5 straight years in exchange for the Brewers to win the World Series? That's a really interesting question. But the reason that it's ultra interesting is like, A, obviously my priority is the Packers. B, I also now have, basically stock and financial interest committed as well to the Packers doing well. 5 straight years of losing seasons is probably not great for the brand, right? So that hurts as well. If you were just talking to me as like a Wisconsin sports fan, in general, what I said, what I wanted to see in my lifetime was each of the 3 main teams, Bucks, Brewers, and Packers, win a championship. And ideally, would have loved for a Badgers or Marquette team or one of these other college teams to win one as well. I just don't think we're going to see it in basketball, football, or anything like that. Just don't think that's realistic anymore. But in general, I would have said I would have, because I would get that Brewers World Series. And I think the Brewers World Series would be unbelievable. But in current situation, it would be tough to say no playoffs for 5 years for Green Bay. Hopefully we get a lot of playoffs and the Brewers can just win the World Series this year and I can get the best of both worlds. Did anyone see Cam Little make a 70-yard field goal? Yes, an absolute insane just feat to be able to do that. Is it the zone defense, or why does it seem like the middle of the field is always open against the Packers? Linebacker mistakes. Don't know what happened today. I do know they brought a couple blitzes, which are going to be vulnerable in a couple situations. Looked like they played soft in a couple different plays as well. Kind of let some underneath stuff go. And see, I don't know without kind of watching it a little bit closer. The stock of Jordan Love is because Zach Farm got absolutely destroyed immediately on the plane. I don't know what that means, Dennis. My apologies. Jaden Reed, day to day, apparently, according to Schefter. That's good news if that ends up being the case. Andy, I love Matt LaFleur, but he is entering Zach Taylor levels of not having his team ready to go in the beginning of the season. See what week 1 brings. We have plenty of time to criticize if they lose to the Lions in week 1. Not concerned about it as of right now. I can hide this dude. There we go. In all seriousness, Sorrell had a run through you quarterback pressure, had to sift through the doo-doo for that one. He had a couple plays. He definitely had a couple plays. Looked like he definitely stepped up. You've had 3 of 4 win championships in your lifetime. It'll never happen for the Brew Crew, sadly. I honestly think that they have a chance to win it this year. I'm probably ready to get hurt again, but I honestly do think they have a chance. They're pretty remarkable right now. All right. Did I miss anything here? All right, Taylor. Preseason game and all, is there one thing you saw tonight that gave you legitimate concern? I don't think so overall. I really wish the like the Jacob Monk and some of the backup offensive linemen. We'll see how Belton and Morgan looked and things like that. But I really thought that would look better, to be honest. I thought they'd be able to kind of hold their own. I thought they had a little bit better depth there than what it looked like today. That was a little bit disappointing. And then I would just say overall, the fact that this team with a lot of talented players. And one of the things that, again, the reason I said the 3-0 prediction in preseason is because one of the things, we talk about it, right? They may not have the superstar players, but they have the depth everywhere at all these different positions. Well, then this is where that should really show through. Like, you should be, cruising past teams where you've just got better depth than they do at every position. And it really did not show that tonight. So the fact that they kind of no-showed this one and the depth did not shine in any way, shape, or form, that would be what was a little bit concerning to me. Not an individual player, not a scheme, not a system, not a style, not anything like that. Just getting anytime you get your teeth kicked in like that, and again, what you're supposed to kind of have as a strong suit looks like a weakness. That is a little bit concerning. So those would be the two things from tonight. Heard it here. Dobbs and Golden 1,000 yards receiving each. All right, we'll see, Whalers. I will take it if we can sign up for that. That's for sure. I'm not even sure Jordan would have taken that sack in a real game. He looked like he was going to run and then just decided to get down and ended up in a more awkward tackle because of it. You could tell he was maybe just trying to be smart there and not try to take an extra hit, and then he ends up taking a hit. It is what it is. Like, that's some of the stuff that could happen. You knew as soon as that play happened, he was not going to see the field again too, which is probably the right decision. All right. I think that's I think we're going to probably leave it there. Engine, I'm glad I'm here too. Thanks for being here with me. Andy, what does Matt LaFleur and company need to do to get these guys to catch the ball? I don't know. But I hope they figure it out sooner rather than later. Concern, not panic. I want my team to show that they can consistently swing first without waiting to be punched. That's well said, R. Smith. I don't disagree with that at all. Yeah, the undefeated preseason is gone. Josh Jacobs is absolutely a major leader on this team. The pick at Bankies was legendary, by the way. That was a pretty cool night. That was a very, very cool night, to say the least. That was awesome. And always good to get together with a lot of the guys that cover the team. We do that pretty much every year. And yeah, very, very cool night that night. One more try before I zonk out. Andy, why not call timeout at the end when we were driving? Wasted opportunity to try and score, maybe build some morale after. No, I understand the thought process. The sooner you can get that game done with and over with, the better. You know, what are you going to do? Throw a Taylor Algersma Hail Mary? And again, what do you accomplish on that? And you're just going to throw a sea of humanity down at the end. You're probably risking more injury. There's no saving grace. There's no, I promise you that the starters are not going to go into, or, week 1 against Detroit, or like next week in week 2 being like, all right, guys, let's carry over that Taylor Algersma momentum from the end of preseason week 1. It's just, you're going to have an ugly taste in your mouth no matter what after that game. There's probably only more bad things that can happen than good things at that point in time. So no, the sooner you can get that game done with, the better. You're more than welcome. I really, really appreciate the kind words there. All right, that's going to probably do it for me today. I'm going to go and rewatch that game. Wish me luck on that. Throw Luiges Pizza in there. Appreciate Luiges Pizza sponsoring us today on our live post-game show. Make sure you're checking them out over at luigespizza.com and following them on social media at Luiges Pizza, LuigesPizza. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the full recap of everything that happened in today's game after my very fun rewatch that'll be happening right now. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.